Hello, everyone. I am Devin Moore, Humanity Rising Ambassador, founder of the Race to Speak Up Anti-Bullying Organization, and your host of Humanity Rising's Mindful Connections podcast. We've partnered with Open Mind Health to bring you mental health professionals from across the country to educate and give you advice in real time on subjects like today's topic, which is suicidality ideation. We recognize that this topic can be emotionally difficult to hear. Please take care of yourself while listening. Feel free to pause, step away, or reach out for support if you need. And if you have any questions during the episode, please put them in the chat and our guests will answer. We'll also have a Q&A at the end. Joining us today is S Nycole Beard, a psychotherapist working with Open Mind Health with years of experience in helping others. She empowers individuals to heal from past experiences and builds healthy, fulfilling relationships. Nicole is dedicated to helping individuals achieve their personal and professional goals through customized coaching programs. Hi, Nicole, how are you?
I'm well, thanks, Devin. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. Yeah, let's just dive right in, Nicole, because there's so many things I really would like to talk about with you today. So, my first thing I would love to ask you is, Nicole, could
Yes.
you start by sharing a bit about your journey going into psychotherapy and also in coaching, and then just what led you to this path?
Okay, good. So many things kind of led me to psychotherapy, specifically life experience. Lived experience is the number one. And coaching, it really came about through my internship. So with psychotherapy, it came through a pivotal, excuse me, I can't talk, I bit my tongue, a pivotal time in my life. I started attending personal therapy sessions, and I was fortunate to work with a remarkable therapist who embodied deeply humanistic and compassionate approach. And through that experience, I discovered the many challenges that I was facing were unrecognized generational trauma. And that realization was transformative for me. It sparked a passion in me to want to help others, help them realize their own trauma and navigate through their healing journey. And ultimately, it led me to return to school. And while I was in school, there was a time when I had to do my clinical internship. And so I had to make a career change because at that time, the deployment was not ready to allow me to do my internship. And so I opened up a coaching practice and to support myself. And so in coaching, I help clients to reclaim their voice, their purpose, and their emotional well being.
Thank you for sharing. I hear you have a lot of different things going on just from that alone. As an associate level psychotherapist preparing for licensure, how has your work evolved over time and who do you primarily work with today?
Okay, good. So my work has significantly grown since then, personally and professionally. One of the most important lessons that I've embraced is allowing myself to be a lifelong learner, being open to not having all the answers, making mistakes, right, and growing from those experiences. That is the best lesson that has taught me is to be free to not know it all. Be free to say, I'll get back to you, or let me check in with my supervisor. That has been the most approach for me, especially for me, because usually I'm like atypical and I know all the things, but to show up with the idea that I don't know everything has been the best for me. That type of mindset has been foundational to my development as a clinician. Over time, my approach has become more trauma informed and also more humanistic and client centered. Today, I primarily work with adult veteran couples, helping them navigate anxiety, trauma, relationship challenges, major life transitions. It's been an incredible, rewarding journey to walk along clients as they reclaim their story, their lives, their healing, and their own resiliency.
Okay, and I know you're just saying that I know you're saying that your preference is to work with adults, but I know you also and we also spoke a little bit before this. I know you've also worked with people of all different ages as well. Can you
Mhm.
talk a little bit more about that and what you've learned across those different age groups?
I can. Yes, while primarily working with my adults is my preference, I've had the opportunity to work with adults across all individuals across all lifespans, from children to adolescents to older adults. And each group brings their own insights and challenges. When I worked with children, they taught me the importance of attunement, creativity, and the role of early attachment plays in the emotional development. adolescence reminded me of the power of identity, and the importance of being seen and heard during such a formative time. With adults, I found that I often work their work often centered around relationships, and recognizing what's my recognizing their own trauma, unlearning patterns, and processing their trauma, and helping them to build healthier relationships with others. And with older adults, they offer a lot of wisdom and reflection, incredibly. And all the groups I've learned have their healing is not a straight line. It's not layered, it's non-linear, and but it is deeply personal at every stage. So although they all brought me such joy, adults are the ones that is my preference. Adults and olders.
I appreciate you, being able to fully engulf yourself with this work, being that trauma is especially something that unfortunately a
Mhm.
large majority of the population experiences across the board, even outside of like our niche is dealing with a lot more, or Humanity Rising is dealing a lot more with bullying. But unfortunately, even outside of that, so many things cause trauma, it causes pain, and it causes harm, even dealing with relationships. And so, how does your experience as a relationship and trauma life coach complement your work as a psychotherapist, given that your coaching experience is done independently outside of Open Mind Health?
Thank you. That's what I was just going to say. It's done differently, but I think that they absolutely complement each other. And psychotherapy is more diagnostic and rooted in exploring past experiences and underlying mental health conditions, right? And I've always believed that even in psychotherapy, naturally, there's a part of coaching in there, especially when it comes to goal setting, motivation, and creating actionable changes. Coaching, on the other hand, is about meeting the clients exactly where they are and helping them move forward with clarity and purpose. In my coaching practice, I focus on action oriented strategies that support growth, accountability, and emotional resilience. I believe that while psychotherapy offers depth and healing, coaching offers momentum and empowerment. And together they create a powerful synergy that supports transformation on multiple levels.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that because it's reminding me a little bit of the work that I do when it comes to Race to Speak Up, or
Mhm.
specifically my Race to Speak Up Against Bullying workshops. Oftentimes, I found a lot of well, I guess you can consider them my clients, but really, literally just my audience members, kind of acting more so as if it's like group therapy. And even within that, I find kind of a few different common trends. I find specifically when it comes to bullying that oftentimes kids don't really feel super comfortable with speaking out, which unfortunately leads to a lot more trauma because it can go down an even darker path. Or I find that adults, who have gone through bullying or hate or that past experiences of trauma, it very well leads into that post-traumatic stress disorder. It leads into long-lasting negative effects. And so I want to focus a bit more on what really drew you to focus on trauma work and how exactly do you define a trauma-informed lens in your practice?
Sure. My my focus on trauma really began again with my own personal journey through therapy. Like that through that process, I really recognized the trauma that I have within myself. And eventually I began to understand the layers of trauma within my family system as well. And that experience was eye-opening and deeply transformative. It gave me profound respect for the ways that trauma can quietly shape our thoughts, behaviors, relationships, and sense of self. In my coaching practice, and even in the work that I do with my clients at Open Mind Health, a trauma informed lens, how I see it, is creating that space that prioritize safety, choice, and collaboration, right? It's about understanding how trauma works, whether it's overt or subtle. It impacts the nervous system and the attachment patterns and emotional regulations. Like I aim to meet clients with compassion and curiosity, right? Not just with the diagnostic script. Rather than asking, what's wrong with you? I ask, what happened to you? And more importantly, what strengths have you developed to survive? And from there, we work together to help them feel empowered, connected, and more in control of their story.
I think that's a great approach, especially coming from someone who's a part of Gen Z. we really need to feel heard. So asking what's really going on, like put me in your shoes for a minute or for this, however long this session is. Let me see what exactly is going on and tell me exactly how you're feeling, if you even know, or just anything relating to these emotions. I
Mhm.
remember during our preparatory call before this, you had mentioned that people who experience suicide ideation, they don't want to die necessarily. They want the emotional or physical pain to stop. How do you
Mhm.
work, or really, how do you help clients understand and work through that distinction?
Well, that distinction is the heart of trauma informed care, right? When someone says that they want to die, what they're often expressing is a deep desire to escape unbearable emotional pain. Not a true wish for life to end. I help clients unpack that by validating their suffering without judgment and by gently exploring what the pain is trying to communicate, because that's what's going on. We focus on identifying the roots of their distress, whether it's feelings of worthlessness, shame, abandonment, or being overwhelmed, and then work to build emotional safety, regulation skills, and a sense of internal agency. I also remind clients that those intense emotions are often responses to past experience, not reflections of who they are or what they're capable of of what they're capable of, excuse me. Using a trauma informed lens means helping clients separate pain from their identity and showing them how healing is possible. It's not about fixing them, it's about helping them to reconnect with hope, with their purpose, and the parts of them that they may have gone away or hidden in order to survive.
That's very powerful. And you know, something else that you're making me think of or kind of reminding me right now
Yeah.
is also the verbiage or like the verbal language that we're using to describe how we're feeling and to describe what exactly we're even going through.
Mhm.
Oftentimes, when I'm speaking to especially kids, they don't really, I know, and I know you work a lot more so with adults, but even then, not oftentimes, there's times where you don't know how you're feeling. But when it comes to my experiences, like working with kids more specifically and adults sometimes, I find that they don't know exactly how they're feeling. I find that they don't know the exact, like, what does mad mean? Does mad mean sad? Does mad mean anxious? Does
Yep.
mad mean, it's these kind of the wording or even powerful phrases. We need to kind of dive more deeply into it. In
Mhm.
fact, one of the most powerful phrases that you use is humanizing suicidal ideation. What does that mean to you, and why is it so important in how we respond to people in crisis?
Oh, Devin, now you're touching the heart of what I believe. This is what I speak to. Because to me, humanizing suicidal ideation means stripping away the stigma, right? The fear, the shame that often surrounds it, and seeing the person behind the pain. Suicidal thoughts are not moral failures or attention seeking behaviors. They're signals of deep emotional distress and unmet need. When we humanize these experiences, we acknowledge that people who struggle with suicide ideation, they're not broken, they're hurting. It's important how we respond in these moments because it can either foster connections or deepen isolation. By creating this type of space, clients feel safe to talk openly about thoughts without judgment, and we begin the process of restoring hope and building trust. It's about honoring their humanity, not about managing the risk. Because oftentimes, as clinicians, we are really looking about, yes, for safety, but liability. Right. And so if we get beyond that and think about how we can humanize this person experience, it helps us to go deeper and see them and see the pain that is manifesting in their ideation thoughts.
It's just completely so devastating that we even have to face the fact that suicide or suicidal ideation is such a big issue. And unfortunately, it is a very big issue, unfortunately, also across the board, among different ages, among different, there's so many different societal factors that really add on to it that is just, it's completely terrifying. And
Mhm.
right now, this conversation is reminding me of a longtime partner of Humanity Rising, Stand for the Silent, the founder, Kirk Smalley. He told me something years ago that kind of really stuck with me. And it's
Mhm.
the fact that oftentimes when someone is experiencing suicidal ideation, just those thoughts or anything surrounding that, they oftentimes have a plan. They oftentimes have a plan to unalive themselves whether it's taking a knife or hanging. There's so many unfortunate different stories that I've heard. I can really only, I know we're talking about it right now, but I can truly only imagine the amount of stories that you've heard working as a professional mental health individual. And so I know another thing that we spoke about also on the prep call, but another thing that we spoke about is you said, and this is something I really want to bring up right now. So you said if we humanize it, it has a different response. Can you
Mhm.
explain how this changes how we support others or even how someone views their own struggles?
Mhm. A humanizing suicidal ideation response says, I see you. I hear you and I'm here with you. That kind of presence can be life saving, right? Instead of rushing to fix the problem, to diagnose it, or to even, as we would do as we're considering whether or not we need to place them on an involuntary hold. But to say that, to be there with them, right? And you see them, right? And you hear them and you let them know that you're there. It is really life saving. So, what I try to understand about the suicidal thoughts, what is it protecting them from? Right? What is happening? What's at the root of this? Is it powerlessness? Is it grief? Or is it exhaustion? When we humanize pain, whether it's from trauma, grief, depression, or suicidal ideation, it shifts the conversation from what's wrong with you to what happened to you and how are you surviving this. That change in language and perspective creates space for empathy and not judgment. It allows people to feel seen rather than labeled or dismissed. In my experience, when clients begin to see their struggles as valid responses to overcoming circumstances rather than signs of weakness or failures, it opens up the door to healing. They stop viewing themselves as broken and start recognizing their resilience. That's powerful. Now, on a broader level, humanizing these experiences encourages a more compassion and supportive community response. It helps loved ones, providers, and systems respond with curiosity and care instead of fear and avoidance and liability issues, right? Ultimately, it's about creating a culture where people feel safe to be honest about their pain and where they know that they're not alone in it. That's what humanizing suicidal ideation is for me.
I think now is a good time to bring up a story that you shared with me about a client who said goodbye by planning a celebration and bringing their family together. Can you share more about that story? And what did that moment teach you about recognizing hidden signs?
Oh my goodness, that's a good one. One of my also favorite. One of I've had experiences that have shaped who I am, right? And have forever put an etch a sketch on me. And this is one of them. So I was working with a client who was dealing with it's just intense pain. And they were dealing with life stress, work stress, and all types of stuff. Well, an elder in their family reached out to them and said, I'm getting of age and I want to celebrate life and I want to plan a celebration. I want everybody to come out. And so my client was like, yeah, okay. And so what they did, they was like, I'm gonna assist. I'll provide, the food, I'll provide the games. For some relatives that had financial struggles, this client of mine, they paid for their air flight. For those who didn't have all the clothes that they needed to buy the shirts for the event, my client did that. She went to pick people up from the airport. She did everything. And the funny thing is that everybody just had good times. No one knew that what was happening with her is that the reason why she was so behind this is because she had resolved that she's going to end her life. And this family celebration that the elder of their family was wanting to gather all their family together, this was their way to say goodbye. And so it was always just grabbing to me with like, no one noticed, no one said how you're doing, what's life, and did you talk to people? She talked to people, she smiled, she looked like everything was going on. No one knew that they were saying goodbye. And that was the reason why all of a sudden they were so happy because they have decided this is the way I'm going to go. And they were slowly saying goodbye to each person. And so when they returned home, they did exactly that. They took a whole bottle of Tylenol PM and it was unsuccessful. They ended up having some liver problems and being in the hospital for 30 days. But once they got out, guess what? They were determined to do what they set out to do, and they did it again. And this time they were late to work. So someone called and sent the police there for a welfare check based on what had happened before. And when they got there, they found them unresponsive with cords wrapped around their neck. And so they got them to the hospital on time, in time, and they're alive today, to tell their story. And I am just so incredibly grateful that this client survived, and so are they now, because one of the things that they realized since then, since therapy, they had a remarkable awakening. And they have a lot of healing. They're still on their healing journey, but life has changed for them. And one of the things they said is that they wouldn't have known life on the other side had their attempt would have been successful. And so, what this experience taught me is that suicidal ideation doesn't always look like it's in despair, right? Sometimes it looks like relief. Sometimes it looks like a burst of generosity, a peaceful smile, a joyful gathering, right? That's why I always emphasize the importance of pulling over safety check. And I know you're probably asking me about that. I got that for my internship. But what I realized, it's better to check in with people, right? And that it is not about being perfect or saying the right things. It's about being present. And it's about the person knowing that you're there for them, that it's not just a routine, it's not something off the checklist, but you're really there with them. So being truly present, and being open and not being scared to ask, are you thinking about harming yourself? How you been feeling? Is there anything I can do? That's what truly saves lives. That's what does it. So that's that.
Thank you for even sharing that story. I'm actually truly so appreciative to speak to you right now, especially when it comes to things like that, because this is just so, unfortunately, but this is just so up my alley. Speaking to a variety of different podcast guests, both youth and adults, I've heard some stories, unfortunately, very similar to what you just said. And so it just leaves me with this pain that I feel for others, that sadness that I feel for others. And also hearing other people's stories, it makes me also think, unfortunately, how could you not fully see it? But I can't even say that because they're acting happy. They're acting, oh, like let's have this celebration or I don't know, other things alike. But it just makes you really need it shows you that it's important to have the checking in. It's important to have the wellness checks, the understanding also that, everyone may not be what happens behind closed doors. You don't know what exactly goes on. You don't know what's going on in the person's life. So spreading that kindness, being positive to others, I think it can truly go such a far way. And I know you're speaking a lot. You've already shared a lot when it comes to kind of a few different signs. Um, I think I just want you to share a bit more about that because there's friends to friends, there's, youth to adults, there's adults to youth.
Mhm.
Any other dynamics that you haven't kind of like mentioned that you'd like to kind of add on to right now? I'd love for you to share if you have anything else to add on with
Oh,
that.
let me think. I think a lot of times going back to when I think about kids is knowing their language, right? And knowing that there may not. I've had children to say directly, I'm thinking of harming myself, but most likely they use other statements like, one day I'll disappear, or I wish I can disappear, right? And you have to be able to lean into that and ask more questions about that because, in terms of kids, one might think, oh, are you thinking about running away? Because when you think, I wish I could disappear. Are you going to hide? Like to inquire, to get to their level. And that's what at the beginning, when I spoke about how I ended up on this journey, it was because I was taking my son to therapy. And I remember I used to drop him off and I used to be like, okay, doc, fix him. I'll be back in 50 minutes. And the doctor told me, no, you got to come in, mom. This is part of you. And that doctor taught me how to re-engage with my child at his level, taught me how to get to his level, his height, taught me how to play in the sand and watch what he does, not just what he says. And so that began to really teach me. It's like meet the person where they're at and listen to them. Watch what they're saying and don't assume because a lot of times people give hints, right? There was another story I saw where a lady was giving away shoes, and everyone knew that she was a shoe lady. No one paid attention that she's giving these shoes out. That's important, right? So these are the things that we need to do. People are talking about, oh, I need to tie loose ends up. I need to get my insurance policy together. If all of a sudden if they've been depressed and now all of a sudden they're really, really happy and they say, oh, I'm doing better. I'm good. No worries about me. Check into that. Oh, it'll all be over soon. Lean into that. I don't want to do this anymore. That's when you lean. Those are what I call the hidden signs, right? Those are the small things that you could do. Don't take anyone's words, for granted. Check in, ask. Even if you think you know what the definition of the word means, that may not mean that to that individual. So the best thing that I would just say is your presence is the most powerful piece that you can have. And that's in those situations.
We have a question in the chat. Let's go straight into Q&A if anyone else has any more questions. But before we
Okay.
do, I really would like to also say, because you're talking about listening, I think this is something, if you ask my friends, if you even ask my parents, they'll say, yeah, Devin, really, when it comes to the word listening, it's not just listening. I don't think it's just the word, and you're really added on to that. You're telling a lot of great stuff. I think people need to understand that the word listen should encompass the words understanding it or being open to understanding it and also acknowledgement, because
Mhm,
when you have those two other parts of it, then you can fully listen to the person and that person will feel heard.
mhm.
That so I'm thanking you for sharing that. Okay, let's get into the questions now. What are signs that someone might be going through suicidal ideation that people might not notice?
Um, they can be really quiet, withdrawn, right? They could um, just be calling you or texting you and just say hi using short words. So they could be either or. They can text you just to say hi, call you on the phone, not have that much to say, or they can isolate themselves a lot and give excuses why they're not as available. Also, it can be they can talk about a lot of physical pain or somatic pain, right? A lot of headaches because it could be that they're so anxious or they're so worried, they so heavy with emotional pain. Those are some of the non-obvious signs of it. Really when people are quiet into themselves. Those are some. But to be honest, I say check on the loud, happy ones. Check on the ones that's always the doer of people. Because a lot of times those are the ones that are not checking in with how they're really feeling. They're just going through the motions. And so, what I say, if there's any inclination, if you just have a thought, talk about it. I regularly talk about, I mean, that's part of my, I don't know, that's part of my own trauma. I take in that. I have these conversations often. I do not shy from having talks about thoughts about not waking up no more. That's the other thing. Sometimes we know a lot of thoughts, we know a lot of signs about, people want to harm themselves. But what about passive suicide ideation? So I have those where I have clients that say, if I died tomorrow and didn't wake up, I'd be fine. If I got on a plane and I didn't make it to my destination because it's an accident, I'm okay with that. That's when you have to lean in. Because on one side, you'll think, oh, well, that makes sense. You have a sense of purpose or you have a religious preference. So you don't have any fear to dying. Check into that. Any
We
other
have a few more questions. Some people also privately got some questions. So the first one is for those who are supporting someone in crisis or for those who might feel like they're at their lowest, what do you want them to hear from you right now?
Okay, I'm gonna get close for this. I want you to hear this. You matter more than you realize. And when you're in that deep pain, it's easy to believe the lie that the world will be better off without you. That's not the truth. Most of us underestimate how necessary we are, right? We learn to shrink, to give ourselves away, to believe we have to settle for less, but you are not meant for the lowest bidder. You are meant for a life of meaning, connection, and hope. If you're feeling like you can't go on, I want you to hold on a little longer. I want you to reach out. I want you to think that it's possible, even though it feels like it's impossible at this very moment. I want you to know that you deserve support and you deserve to be here. The world needs you exactly as you are. Your story is not over. And so I want you to know that if you are with someone and they share that they are having thoughts or, they just don't know if they can make it, or if they have a plan or intent or means, I want you to call 911. I want you to teach them to dial 988, right? Immediately. Immediately. Intervention and how soon we can intervene is so important. But most importantly, do not leave them alone. Do not do it. Stay with them. Stay with them on the phone. Don't answer another call. Don't be bothered with another text. Stay with them until you can get them some help.
That's some powerful advice, Nicole. Thank you for sharing that. We have another question, and there's one more question that I would love to ask you because it's another
Oh,
thing that we spoke about on the phone also. So,
okay.
okay. Here's the question though from our audience. Can you share your perspective on the importance of honest conversations about suicidal ideation, even with clients who might not openly talk about it?
Sure. So having an honest conversation is just that. I actually don't even really like the term unalive, and I know why it's used, but I don't like it. I prefer the exact words that they are planning to harm themselves or they're killing themselves. I had a client, and they matter of fact, this client that I told the story that was telling their whole family goodbye. One of the things that they were doing, half the reason why is because they were going to use an insurance policy because they felt that they had a cloud iron insurance policy and their family could live off of that, right? And one of the things I brought up is, do you know if your insurance policy has a, disclosure about if you die by suicide, whether or not they're going to pay a claim, right? And do you know the reason why your pain is going to be over for you? Because you're going to be dead. You won't be able to feel. That's why. But the day that you do that, the day that you stop breathing, is the day that your family, your loved ones, your extended family and friends, is the day that they begin their suffering. And so some of the times when I have honest conversations, it's just that I do not sugarcoat it. I don't believe in that. I believe in talking about exactly what this means. When you are talking about harming yourself, you are talking about, for this purpose, I'll say unalive, but you're talking about no longer breathing. And so again, I go into what type of pain is going on. What is their pain trying to communicate? Right? Because in the lane of trauma, what's happening to the brain is the brain is trying to find a resolution to end the pain, end the suffering. It's seeking to resolve this. And so that is one way that it would opt to go, just as a form of a trauma response, believe it or not. And so that's why that's really important to have intervention and to have the honest conversation. And a lot of times people think that if you mention it, it might cause the person to think about it more. That's not true. If you mention it, you open the door for opportunity for them to admit how often they've thought about it, how much they have been in pain. People are suffering incredible pain. And if they don't have anyone that they can talk to, that's what stores in them. And then I tell you, that brain is a smart thing. And it goes and goes and goes. And so at some point, all people is trying to do is escape from this internal pain that they're dealing with. I hope that answered the question.
I think it definitely did. Thank you for sharing that. Also, thank you for giving your perspective on the word unaliving. The only reason why I use it is simply just because I find a lot of people in my generation use it, but we do need to call it like how it is. You're ending your own life because you feel that there's no other way to escape the trauma. You just give I feel like you get the full science behind it, like just now. Thank you so much for sharing that. The last question I want to ask you is, so you've also spoken about the concept of life-affirming suicide and a powerful pull-over analogy. Can you
Mhm.
share what that means and how it informs the way that you talk with clients?
Yep. So my supervisor at my internship taught me this. And so the way that, and that stays with me forever. So it's an analogy. So it's like, imagine that you're driving, right? And she would say the client is beside you and the road is your conversation. You're cruising along and suddenly you hit something. It's subtle, but not loud, but you hit something. And so my supervisor would say, Nicole, what do you do? Do you get out and check it or do what do you do? And I said, it depends on if it's how hard was it and how close home I am. And she would say, no, you always pull over, right? Because ignoring a subtle sign can lead to dangerous outcomes, right? So pulling over means taking the moment to pause and assess, right? To step out of the momentum of the session. Again, this checking for, checking for risk, but gently explore what you might have missed. And so that can look like all of a sudden the hairs on your arm stand up. For me, it's always my eyebrow will go up. It's usually my right eyebrow will go up when I hear something, or it can be something in your stomach, some intuitive notion in you that tells you something is off. And when you feel that, you don't just keep going, you pull over, right? So clinically, it looks like pause and explore. Can you tell me more about what you just shared? You reflect your concern. When I hear that, I feel a little concerned. How often has this been coming up for you, right? You ask directly and gently. Have you had any thoughts about not wanting to wake up or not being here anymore? Directly ask. And then you normalize the distress. Life can be unbearable sometimes, but you're not alone. And you respond intentionally. You create a safety plan, call in support, and you continue with care. Like I said before, connection, not perfection, saves lives. And so it's just about making sure you are present, you listen, you're present, not panic. You affirm the client's courage. I'm so glad you shared this with me. I'm glad you trusted this space. And again, you humanize their pain. Feeling like this doesn't mean something's wrong with you. It means you've been carrying around something for far too long, right? And you just always respond to what's unspoken as much as what's said. That's the key. You're really addressing what is not being said, not only just what's said. So that was it. And I use that all the time. So I can be at the end of the session, I can tell when it's about to approach, and I'm like, "Ah, we got to pull over." And that's just what I do. I think of that method to pull over and do the safety check.
Nicole, I want
Yeah.
to thank you for giving such powerful information, knowledge, and advice. Everyone behind your screens, give Nicole a round of applause, please, because I really want to thank you so much for joining us today and talking about such an important topic. All of these topics of mindful connections is so important. It's just when it comes to, unfortunately, modern day suicidal ideation, it's really something that's just so big, unfortunately, and so devastating. So I want to thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you. Do I have one opportunity to say one last and important thing?
Go ahead, go right ahead.
I just want to remind people that according to the National Institute of Mental Health in the US, 12.8 million adults reportedly seriously considering suicide. 1.5 million attempt suicide. For every suicide death, there's typically 10 emergency department visits and around 48 reported attempts. And 325 people seriously consider contemplating it. On average, one person dies by suicide every 11 minutes. However, despite these concerning data, the numbers keep going up. But what I want to say, this is very much a preventable public health. We can do something about this. That's all I have.
Thank you for sharing that. Those numbers are heartbreaking and they really speak to how serious and widespread this issue is. It reminds us just how important it is to keep having these conversations and make sure that people know that they're not alone. So, thank you again, Nicole. And also, we really appreciate you bringing your insight and knowledge about the topic of suicidality ideation. Thank you to everyone for joining. Remember, joining the Humanity Rising movement means that you can receive service hours for watching the Mindful Connections podcast and completing our after episode survey. Everything is also linked below in this YouTube recording or this YouTube video. Now, everyone, remember, let's be mindful and rise up for ourselves and for each other. All right, everyone, we will see you on our next episode and have a great one.